I mean, you've probably sat in hour and a half long sessions. Research tells us that the majority of adults have an attention span between 18 and 20 minutes. If you don't take that into consideration and truly make it a worthwhile experience where the adults are actually engaged, if you don't kind of put all those things together, you're going to miss the boat. And that's what the majority of programs, they don't do. They don't make the adult learning connection, and they don't explain, the why behind the scenes.
Hey folks, welcome to this episode of Amplify, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. Today in the studio, my guest is David McGurk. David has joined Apogee Global RMS as the VP for Leadership Transformation. David and I share quite a bit in commonality in terms of our backgrounds. He's a graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point, retired Army officer, has spent a number of years engaged in and developing leadership development and curriculum programs. We're excited about having him on the Apogee Global RMS team. And really, this episode is about taking advantage of the opportunity to introduce David to the wider audience of the leadership student, because we are absolutely excited about the future of leadership development through Apogee Global, and David's going to be leading that effort as the principal for that vertical. So as you go through this particular episode, remember, we're talking about assembling a group of folks who are deeply experienced and with expertise that is likely unmatched, or at the very least among the highest that you will see in industry today as it relates to leadership development and experience. And I think you'll get a lot out of this introductory call with David. You're going to be seeing a lot of him on the Leadership Student. So welcome to the episode, and have a good listen. David McGurk, it's a pleasure to have you on Amplify, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. How are you, my friend?
MK, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. Finally, we get a chance to have some discussion together.
Absolutely. Discussion about a topic that I think from the moment that you and I connected and when we first met is a topic we both feel very, very passionately about. I like to say that the topic of leadership is at the core of everything that Apogee Global is about. And when I stood up Apogee Global, I always thought from an advisory perspective that we needed to offer something in the way of leadership development for both individuals and teams. And so when you and I connected and I sort of expressed some of that messaging to you, and you returned that messaging with equal amplification and had indicated that leadership had played a significant role in your life and your development as a professional. So the audience can get to know you a bit. Why the subject of leadership? Why is it so important to you?
My career, my leadership journey started at a very young age. I graduated from high school. I went into the Army. And after my first few years in the Army, not knowing what I wanted to do as I pursued life, I had a leader that took an interest in me. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And behind the scenes, he worked with my father to get me a packet put into the U.S. Military Academy Preparatory School, which was in advance going to West Point. So those two individuals, obviously a father figure was very important in my life. And I had an officer, a leader that was in the military that, again, saw something in me. And next thing you know, I'm actually I'm on duty one day and the phone rings. This is in Germany in 1987, 88. I pick up the phone and it's the admissions officer from the prep school. And that kind of led me to the next chapter on my leadership journey, going to the prep school and eventually graduating from the military academy.
That was the beginning of it. What have you seen in the way of leadership and the impact that it's had on you throughout your professional career? It's not enough. I think, I like to give our fellow service academy graduates kudos as well. I like to think that we're all sort of formed in this crucible that is certainly a leadership development environment, but I'm unwilling to cede that leadership has exactly the same impact on every one of those individuals as maybe it did for both you and I. Why has the topic still been so important for you so many years out of that experience?
So to me, leadership is a personal journey. And you're right, it's different for everybody. And I would think that at the start of careers, people may have the same opportunities in terms of going through that crucible and, the leader development that comes out of the backside of that. I said, but then I think the differentiating fact after that is is the leaders that they experience and how much those leaders may invest in them. So I've been very fortunate through my time in the military that I've had leaders that took a deep personal interest in what I was doing, which in turn kind of shaped me in my formative years, as a young officer, kind of moving through the ranks. And I think having people invest in me, and I saw what that brought out in me, was something that allowed me then in turn and make an understanding that, people-centric leadership is really the most important in terms of being able to grow people and maximize performance of organizations. And I think where it became extremely personal to me. So yes, a lot of great experiences, through a leadership journey in multiple organizations. But I had an opportunity. I spent 13 months in Iraq as an embedded advisor. I came back from that journey, went to the Army's Command General Staff College, which is the professional military course, which is probably the last one that, at least in the Army, officers go to unless they get picked up for command and they move on to the Army War College. I had a fortunate opportunity to, once I graduated from that course, to go to a military installation. I was recruited because of my reputation by a lieutenant colonel who was taking battalion command, and he wanted me on his team. A few mere months in a command, I realized the impact that war had on individuals in the military, not only with them, on their families. And after I took command, I started to get to know the soldiers in my organization. And I had a handful of soldiers that were struggling with mental challenges about, what war had done to them, and, family challenges. And I developed some really good relationships at a personal level with some of these soldiers. And then on December 6th, on 2007, one of my soldiers committed suicide. And that had an immediate impact on me, because I would think, as any good leaders who care and are truly vested in their people, I felt that I had done something wrong, that I had failed that individual. So I really started digging deep, and I tried to understand the human dimension even more than I had. And, I exposed some blind spots in terms of how I approached myself and how I interacted with folks, and just understanding of the human psychology and, what would cause somebody to do something like that. And, I know from our conversations with your time in the FBI, and, you've had colleagues that, have unfortunately taken their lives. It leaves a mark on you as a leader and as a person. And I truly committed myself to trying to be a better person, to be a better leader, to understand myself, to understand how the inner workings of individuals' emotions really drive. And then from that point on, what could I do as a leader to make a better difference?
Do you think leaders have to have those critical moments in order to be spurned to want to be better? You just described a critical incident.
Yeah.
Or the parlance certainly that we used in law enforcement circles. A critical incident that had a profound impact on you, which drove you to want to learn more. Do you think that's a necessary catalyst to leadership development, or can the light bulb go off without that catalyst and people still want to get deeply into this topic?
I mean, I think in the right environment that, a deeply moving event like that doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be the catalyst. I think for some people it is. I mean, I've always approached life and leadership as a lifelong journey. It's always about continuing learning, about continuing making yourself better. As you know, I've got a master's in adult and continuing education. And, I've always had a curiosity and a desire to learn. I think a lot of people have that. Some people may have to have it nurtured out of them, but, there's a lot of psychology behind about, barriers to individual change. And sometimes we just don't know that there's barriers that exist. And for some, it just may take an event like that to happen to make them realize that, maybe I need to do something. To me, I wouldn't say that I was on a developmental plateau. I just think that because of truly how much I cared about people in my organization, I always approach life by trying to improve myself every day. But I'm like, if this is something that's going on, if people are truly struggling, with certain things, from a psychological perspective, and you may have experienced this in the FBI or not, but for the long time in the military, it was taboo to talk about seeking, mental health services or counseling for problems. People just kind of generally decided to kind of like suck it up, and kind of continue on. I wanted to be an engine of change, so to speak, and so it caused me to. I always connected with people, but the incident I think was a catalyst for me to kind of try to connect to people on a more more personal and a deeper level.
So you talked about at one time it was taboo in environments like that to seek help, to lead with, hey, my personal wellness maybe isn't where it needs to be. Um, if I were to say to you that I think that the current situation as it relates to that in both, and let's use environments that you and I are both familiar with, certainly the military is something that we share, our military backgrounds. I add into that law enforcement backgrounds as well. I think it's very similar. And I don't know that, um, I don't know that the environment has changed all that much. I do know that both military and law enforcement are paying a lot of lip service um, to this subject of wellness of individuals. But I don't know from a cultural standpoint whether or not it's still achieved a level of not just awareness, but is it really now a part of the culture such that people do feel comfortable seeking help? And the reason I question it is because, with all of the emphasis around it, I can tell you that I still, even, I expressed to you a story, and you certainly heard me convey this in a keynote that I was providing one time, that, my first 5 years in the Bureau, I knew 5 people that committed suicide. Certainly triggered in me, I think, from a catalyst standpoint, a deeper understanding of the topic of leadership and the responsibility really of leaders in the professional realm. But guess what? That wasn't the end for me. Even on my way out the door, the last 6 years of my career, I knew of one additional individual, and then since retiring, 2 people that I knew from that law enforcement environment committed suicide. And so I say all of that to, again, challenge the perception that folks are really doing anything about it, and whether or not anything can effectively be done, I do believe is worth debating as well, or at least worth talking about. But I mean, do you see that pulling the veil away from it, is that enough to get people to engage and to want to talk about challenges that they may be facing and to seek help from others? What are your thoughts around whether or not we have either as a society created that, or maybe what you've seen? I know you spent some time as well in the private sector following your retirement from the Army. What have you seen of still these working environments, and whether or not they nurture people or allow them to feel as though they can open up about things?
I'm not sure that, from a societal perspective, we're ever going to be able to make a dent to the level that we would hope to make.
Yeah, that's fair.
The human dimension is complex, and society, changes, connectivities change, society changes so much, but I will say that as a leader, a deeper connection to an individual can make a difference. Recently we were at the event in DC, and we had an opportunity to talk to some fellow colleagues, and we were sharing some discussion. And I shared with one of the attendees that, I spent many years in combat. I've had many awards. Nothing pales into comparison. I've had 6 individuals confide in me that if it wasn't for the connection that we had, for me with them as a leader, they would have taken their lives. 6 people. I wish it could be 60 people, but it's circumstantial. But I do think, and I'm very passionate about, one of the things that I've come to learn over the years is, and many institutions still approach leader development from the same kind of archaic methodology of talking about skill sets and superficial and what you need to be and what you need to know, and that's just not enough. For us to truly be able to connect and help people, we have to first and foremost understand ourselves to a deep level, and then once we've understood ourselves to that deep level, then we can truly meet somebody where they need to be. But we've had to have met ourselves there first. And many programs, it's kind of like the old adage, the iceberg, and then below the surface of the water, there's a massive structure. So what people see of us on the outside is just the tip of the iceberg. We have paradigms and belief structures that are internal, that cause us to operate and make decisions on a daily basis. And you probably heard me say before, it's like a computer. We turn our computers on, there's an operating system in the background. We can, type keys and hit commands, and we don't understand why that happens. We're the same way as humans. We have an operating system, our subconscious, that operates in the background, that kind of drives our thinking, drives our decisions. And it's truly kind of being able to kind of step back and peel the onion back on yourself to understand what all that is, and then being able to connect on a deeper level and help other people understand. That's powerful. That's really important. And the power of people is where you start to have change in organizations.
I think you and I both agree. In fact, I know that we do, that the way leadership development is conveyed and taught currently in the corporate structure is broken. I don't know that it was ever right in terms of how it's taught or conveyed in corporate. But I would tell you, I sat through a leadership development class or workshop, if you will, some months ago. And I found the experience to be stale. It seemed to me that the normal exercise of going through, these somehow manufactured games and talking points and flip charts in the corner with the whiteboards and things like that seemed to be ineffective to me. I don't know that it moved. In fact, I know it did not move the needle for the team that I was a part of. It simply was an exercise to go through, and then ultimately a box gets checked.
Yeah.
What are those folks missing in that experience? What is it about the current state of leadership development that these big corporate entities, most of whom get paid a lot of money to send teams in and to act as though they're leadership coaches, what are they missing?
I think they're missing two things. One, now I'm sure there's some facilitators or folks that participate on these teams that they can facilitate good discussions. They're articulate, but many of them don't have a deep kind of background in andragogy, pedagogy, which are like the theories behind adult learning, like how actually adults learn. And then the other piece of it is the why behind it. So I can tell you, MK, you need to manage your emotions. As a leader, you need to be consistent, right? Your people want consistency. People at the end of the day want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be felt. I can tell you that. But most organizations and most leader development programs don't help you understand how to do it, the why behind it. Something as simple as, and it doesn't have to be, a long drawn out process, but an understanding of neuroscience and brain biology will tell you that the brain has two main functions, and that's to minimize threat and maximize reward. Well, when we talk about minimizing threats, that could be somebody that you work with, a colleague or a teammate that does or says something that really triggers you, right? So there's an emotional response to that. And sometimes what happens, and I've done it before, and I'm sure you've done it, we're all human beings, and we're endeavoring to be better. And, you say that flippant comment that later on in the evening when you're sitting at dinner, you say, man, I wish I would have never said that. And it caused a tense environment, right? So little strategies of how to avoid doing those type of things. Your right side of your brain works faster than your left side of the brain. So how about just take a minute, take a pause, take a deep breath, and think about what you're getting ready to say. And what that does is that allows your left brain to catch up, or slows down your right brain a little bit. And you start thinking a little bit better. And then you kind of think of some options. make a decision and move forward. So that is something that, we could coach people on. Say, hey, if you get upset about something, the reason why your emotions are so strong is because your brain is designed for that. It's a defensive mechanism. So if we understand the defensive mechanism and put a strategy in place to basically allow yourself to balance a little bit, you'll start to say better things, you'll make better decisions, etc. So again, and then it's conveying to the adult learning population, what does that mean to them? What are the learning theories about how people like to learn? The fact that, you've probably sat in hour and a half long sessions. Research tells us that the majority of adults have an attention span between 18 and 20 minutes. So if you don't, as you're delivering programs, if you don't take that into consideration, if you don't cater to the various learning styles and truly make it a worthwhile experience where the adults are actually engaged, right? So learning theory tells us adults have to be engaged. It's experiential for them. If you don't kind of put all those things together, you're going to miss the boat. And that's what the majority of programs, they don't do. They don't make the adult learning connection, and they don't explain, the why behind the scenes.
What effectively, there's still an ongoing debate around whether or not you can really teach leadership to people. Certainly, there are those of us that have come across and seen throughout our careers people who have a certain amount of sort of natural charisma, it might be described as, and get these elements of leadership that are an absolute necessity. People would run through a brick wall for them. Those folks are few and far between. I'm always excited when I get an opportunity to be in the room with someone like that, or work with or for someone like that. But for the most part, that's not the case. What makes you optimistic that you can teach, train, and grow an individual in an adult environment professionally? What makes you optimistic that they can learn this stuff?
So first and foremost, for the majority, adult learning theory tells us that adults, as they grow older, regardless of like trade and space you're in, that adults, they want to learn. They become curious. So that may be an assumption that's not applicable across the board of the majority. So people are curious. People want to improve themselves, and while research says that our IQ is fixed, our emotional intelligence increases as we grow, and it just makes sense, right? It's that wise individual who
right.
basically can help the next generation move along. But the skill sets, that a lot of skill sets completely align with emotional intelligence, and we're talking about decision making, we're talking about interpersonal relationships, we're talking about communication, self-awareness, self-regard, right? Everything that we start talking about. What is it that somebody who we think, especially in today's modern society, when we're having trouble, and not trouble, but the complexity and the volatility of the market, and the expanding workforce, and diversity, and the pace at which challenges come to organizations, and then the speed at which they have to make decisions, all the things that we need in a modern day leader, it can be all tied back to truly understanding yourself, rooted in emotional intelligence. And then all those things in emotional, they're all skills that can be developed over time through strategies. So if somebody is truly eager to learn, we can do it. There is a bit of a nature versus nurture, as you know as well as I do. We've all run into those very charismatic leaders who you're like, wow, they're pretty influential. They got it going on. Others work at it, but at the end of the day, developing the skills that are very important to successful leaders, they're just that, they're skills, and they can be taught.
So I put up this banner to start a consulting agency, organization, firm. We're at the core of it. We're talking about things like people development, like investment in your people as the start and beginning of any effort to transform your organization. You and I came across one another through our mutual networks. And I told you a little bit from a vision standpoint, and now we've had numerous conversations since then.
Yeah.
What's your impression of, one, the market for this kind of learning and development, and why choose Apogee Global as the place where you want to invest your time, effort in expressing what you know from a knowledge standpoint about leadership development?
So both of us have military backgrounds. I spent better part of 5 years in and out of conflict zones. I've spent basically the entirety of my adult, time in the military. I went in the military at 18 and I came out at 52. And as I look at the complexity of today's world, and they need leaders and organizations that embrace ambiguity, that can deal with rapid change, decision making with less than optimal information, being comfortable and building trusting environments where people can share and we can innovate. That was my whole life. The structures, there was structure in the military, but the way they approached empowering people was vastly different than what I have seen since my time in, I went in private sector. Excuse me. So I see the changing world and the need to have more, adaptive and reflexive leadership. And the only reason why I was successful as a leader is because I grew my people and I empowered my people. Excuse me. And that's been at the heart of everything I've ever done. Truly caring about people and investing in people. And, the sky's the limit when you do that within organizations. And when we connected, that was basically MK Palmore. You're like, I have a vision of creating an organization that truly kind of surpasses anything that is currently in existence about driving, growth and positive change in organizations through their people. And it just so happens that, I myself was part of a team that did not do that. And I started searching for my next opportunity. And it, thankfully, you and I had the opportunity to cross paths, and here we are today. Your mission, your passion about, people is completely aligned with my personal moral compass and philosophy. And as we've grown to learn each other, and I know we still have inroads on that, and I'm excited about the opportunity. I know it's our relationship is going to flourish, and I'm excited about bringing this concept to life. And to use a term that I've used before and that you use is, we're building the plane in flight. And we've probably done some of that aspect before in different parts of our lives. But when you bring on board, people that are aligned, it's almost like getting to know you as we're building this plane in flight. If you told me, hey, Dave, I need you to go hang on the wing for a minute, I'd do it. There'd be risk involved with that, but I would do it because I'm confident in not only your vision, but your abilities to drive this, lifelong passion that you've had into reality.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Again, for the purposes of the audience, I acknowledge that you and I think have found more than a few synergies on this topic of leadership. And you really hit the core of it about a minute and a half ago when you started to describe this switch that needs to go off in leaders and managers in the private sector, that investing in your people really is at the core. It's like unlocking a key to productivity. Investing in the individuals on your team and pouring into them will get you to all of the KPIs and all of the productivity and everything that you want to accomplish as a team. And instead of putting those things like product development, like getting code shipped on time, or building a particular widget, or building a device or product that needs to get shipped out the door, instead of keeping those numbers in mind, if you keep in mind, are my people getting out of this experience what they need to get in order to take them to their natural level of ascent, their natural development as a professional, their sort of natural matriculation. If you're not doing that, I think you're missing the assignment, and that's the piece that I think clicked for both you and I. And I sincerely believe that as we both structure, organize, and deliver these new thoughtful ways of learning those skills, I think people are going to get it, and I think it's going to be impactful to organizations, and definitely, it will be impactful to individuals, because my suspicion is, and as you noted earlier, you had a pretty big impact, and you talked about lives saved because of your intervention, your engagement. Nothing's more pleasurable than to have someone circle back with you and say, hey, it was something you said, the way you treated me, the way that you operated, that gave me then the ability to develop, to thrive, to make a decision that was necessary for me. Nothing's more pleasing in the professional realm than hearing that kind of thing circled back, where you had an influence or an impact on someone. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to do with the leadership development programs that we're developing here at Apogee. Yeah. We got some things in the pipeline that we can't reveal fully, but I've had conversations with you about leaning on technology quite a bit in terms of our delivery methodology, because I come from a technology background, and it's like, how do I infuse these experiences that I'm having in the technology space with this passion topic of mine, and folks who sign up for our offerings and who get an opportunity to go through our courses will see how we're deploying some of this technology and utilizing it to our benefit. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about whether or not you see is there friction between technology and learning, or do you view technology as a tool? Like what's from your perspective? Is this a crafted tool that you absolutely need to have, or can you do without it? What do you think?
I think anybody that doesn't realize the potential of technology today, particularly AI, they're going to be standing on the platform after the train leaves and scratching their head, wondering what just happened. And leader development and education is no different. I think when it comes to, and I say education, so I don't, leader development to me is education. We're not training people, we're educating people. If I educate you on yourself and et cetera, that's really education. So education, we definitely need to, leverage technology for leader development and education. And it has to be done in the right way, right? So you can't overload, you can't create cognitive overload. You've got to do it in a way that's meaningful, impactful, and it's lasting, and it's tied to learning outcomes. But what's amazing about leveraging technology, especially in leader development, is we could take a team and we could bring them into a room, and we could leverage technology to accelerate learning. But not just accelerate learning, but create a lasting learning event. So generally speaking, research shows that kids need to hear a word 70 times in context to understand and learn what that word means. And when it comes to the adult brain, making new connections, there's sets and reps that it needs to have. So we could leverage, technology to give an organization, a team, whatever that looks like, the sets and reps that it needs in order to accelerate learning within that particular niche area or whatever they want. But then they're able to capture all that learning, what took place, and then turn around and improve its organizational processes based on what they just learned. And now not only are those leaders and participants better, but now collectively the organization can progress based on the implementation and the effective use of technology.
Yeah, I'm really excited about where we're headed with this, and I do fully expect you to be have some control of the reins here. You may have to pull me back a little bit from time to time. I get overly excited about technology's presence in our lives, again, as a tool, just because I think that if used correctly, it can help you move faster. It can help you execute better. And I think that from the education standpoint, that's how I see most of the technological development that's going on. I think it'll help people learn faster. I think it'll help them learn in new and different ways. When you think about the education environment, I think how people learn has been a bit of a challenge. There have always been outliers. We have systems, especially here in the United States, in terms of how we think people learn. And when folks don't fit into those systems, there's not much room for them. And in fact, you have to look far and wide for opportunities for people who don't fit in that mean standard of how to learn in terms of matriculating through our educational system. So I think this new technology, of course, we're talking about artificial intelligence, will allow people to learn in new and different ways. And I think that we're going to take advantage of that, certainly from the Apogee standpoint, as we go through the process of delivering leadership development. I meant to ask you earlier, and we had a recent experience of a customer conversation where I think we had to spend a period of time overcoming an objection just to the idea of whether or not there's value in leadership training. And I wanted to circle back and talk with you about why do you think there's so much, how should I say, folks are very questionable when you're talking about the value that you can deliver through leadership training in the corporate sector. Why do you think that is?
I think it just goes back to the way, traditional models have yet to adapt to more contemporary models and just the approach. And unfortunately, it gets back to, right? So most people that we're going to talk to about business opportunities, they all fall into that adult range. And most organizations, they don't take the proper steps to make the learning environment impactful for the individual, and it's got to be lasting. At the end of the day, there's got to be return on the investment. And whatever that looks like, right? That's we articulate that with clients, but at the end of the day, I've attended a lot of these different seminars and what purported to be leader development programs, and I walk away scratching my head like, that was, I'm not gonna say it was a waste of my time. Maybe I learned a few nuggets, and better yet, I met a couple people that I didn't know before. But in terms of taking a product to an organization where it's an investment for them, they want to see a return on their investment, and that could be retention of employees, it could be well-being of employees, it could be profit margins. Right? We don't have enough time to go into how you can unleash the potential of people to increase profits. It's just they haven't seen someone yet approach it from the perspective that we're approaching it from, and they've not gone through an environment or sat through a program that was really impactful to them that says, yeah, I want all my people to have this. We're going to be the game changers. We're the ones that are going to go out there and we're going to disrupt the environment, and we're going to say, look, this is how it should be done. This is how we're going to kludge all of our experiences across the board. And this is how we're going to meld with it technology. And we're going to create something that we're already in the process of, like we said earlier, building that plane. We're already creating this, and it's going to happen. And I'm excited about, the Apogee name, is going to be front and center here in the short term, because we're going to do it right. And people are going to be able to say, you know what, that's what I should have had all along. I mean, look at the statistics. You know what they say? Liars use statistics, and statistics never lie. 78% of people over the last handful of years have left their organizations due to poor management, poor leadership, and toxic environments. Good leadership doesn't allow that. 90% of polled CEOs say that a good leader development program in their organization would be a game changer. But then you poll those same individuals about why they haven't implemented a program that they would think would be beneficial. And they say, well, I've not seen one out there that can do it for me. So the desire is there. You know what the answer is?
We're going to bring it to them.
We're going to
Absolutely.
Bring it to them. Yeah.
So, David, I'm excited to be on this journey with you. I think both you and I are going to learn during the course of this experience. But at the same time, my real passion, I think your real passion, is delivering impact and delivering for the benefit of individuals and teams, and that benefit will subsequently benefit these companies and enterprises that we're going to deliver these educational opportunities to. I am excited that you're on board with Apogee Global, and I do hope that in the coming years that people make the name Apogee synonymous with leadership development. If that, at the end of the day, is the core takeaway from this experience and journey that we're underway on, then that to me will be an absolute win. So this has been an introduction, I think, folks, to David McGurk. He's the VP of Leadership Transformation for Apogee Global. You're going to see quite a bit of him on the social media landscape as we begin to roll out ostensibly some of his thought leadership around the topic of leadership and leadership development. So you're going to be seeing a lot of him. I hope that everyone engages, push back sometimes on some of the stuff that we're talking about, and or join in the conversation, because we are on a rocket ship ride, and we're excited about what we're going to be able to deliver to individuals and enterprise. David, thanks for being on Amplify, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. And you will be, I'll tell folks now, co-hosting some episodes of this podcast. So from time to time, you will see David in place of myself. He's got some folks he wants to bring in and have some conversations with about this topic of leadership development. So you'll be seeing both of us swap in and out of this hosting seat. But I'm excited that you're on board, and thanks for spending some time having this conversation.
MK, I'm excited about being on the team, and I'm strapped in on the rocket ship, and I'm ready to do it.
All right, here we go, folks. Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. If you're ready to elevate your personal leadership and drive your team's success, connect with Apogee Global RMS for custom coaching and development solutions. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of impactful personal leadership strategies. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and empowering those around you. Together, we'll amplify your success